Ciao Anima Bella, and welcome back to our soul-led exploration through the Evo Potential Map. Today's episode is a doorway that leads us outside the limits of our ego and into a space where real connection lives. We're talking about the trait called comprensione, in English, understanding. But don't be fooled by how soft that word sounds. True understanding isn't passive. It's one of the most courageous inner acts we can commit to. Because understanding asks us to let go of judgment, of certainty, of the comfort of being right. It invites us to look at others and life itself with eyes wide open. Even when we see triggers that activate our fear, our pain, or our past. Let's take a deep breath. Let's dive right into this trait of understanding because this one matters. So in the Evo profiling system, understanding is your capacity to see people and situations from different perspectives, to set aside your personal filters and prejudices, to stay curious rather than critical, and to seek truth even when it challenges your version of it. When this trait is high, it means that you're tolerant, discerning, and emotionally mature. So you have fun asking questions. You naturally suspend assumptions. And you carefully observe before reacting or responding. When this trait is low, your mind closes quickly. You interpret everything through your own worldview. And you become critical, impatient, maybe a little judgmental, especially towards what feels unfamiliar or different or contradictory. So you may say things like, how can they think that way? They're just so wrong. I don't get it and I don't want to get it. And that's where the real danger begins, because every time we shut down our understanding, we shut down our own evolution. And let's see how that happens. Understanding isn't truly tested with people who agree with us. It's tested with people who bother us, who trigger us, who believe something radically different. And this is where inner alchemy returns again. What if these people, the irritating, the irrational, the infuriating, are not enemies, but sacred mirrors? What if they are teachers of edges, inviting us to stretch our soul's capacity? Imagine that. So understanding doesn't mean agreeing. It means being willing to see the other's perspective, even if you still choose a different path. So you can understand someone's worldview and still hold your own as your preferred choice. You can hear someone's story and still walk in a different direction. But when we shut down the curiosity that enables us to do this, we shut down our chance to grow. So imagine life as a vast glass dome, and each of us holds a cloth. Every judgment we make, every assumption we protect, every wound we don't examine adds a little fog to our part of the glass. Over time, the entire dome is covered in fog, and we stop seeing others clearly. We only see shapes and forms through a distorted lens. And this distorted lens translates everything into danger or potential threat. And this brings our nervous system automatically in defense mode, reactive or withdrawing. But when understanding is alive inside of us, we gently begin to wipe the glass, We slow down. We say, hey, maybe there's something I don't know. Maybe there's something I could learn. Maybe there's something interesting out there. Can you tell me more? And this one question, can you tell me more? Or can you help me understand? These questions are a form of spiritual power because it lets in light. It lets in alternatives. It opens up our foggy glass dome. When the understanding trait is low, criticism becomes the language of the nervous system. We focus on flaws. We get stuck on how things should be according to us. We invalidate people who don't think, don't feel, don't act like we do. And worst of all, we justify this behavior. We call it the truth, or we call it being honest, or we call it, well, I tell it like it is. But really, it's just fear. Criticism is often the ego's armor, a way to feel superior when we're secretly unsure or we feel afraid. Understanding strips away that armor, and that's terrifying until magically it becomes freeing. So the ideal scenario is engaging in discernment with compassion. Imagine this. You walk into a room with someone who you usually find difficult to interact with. And instead of bracing to go on defense mode or attack mode, you soften. You watch. You wonder, what makes them feel safe? What makes them lash out? What's underneath that surface? So you don't collapse in your own boundaries, but you rise above the battlefield. You listen with the ears of your soul. You ask questions instead of delivering verdicts. And you hold silence instead of assuming meaning. You become a healer in a conversation. You become someone safe to talk to, even when there's disagreement. That is true leadership, inner leadership and outer leadership. And that is the trait of understanding. Spiritually, this trait causes us to hold mystery with reverence. You don't need to solve people. You don't need to label them. You don't need to convert them. You simply just witness them. You remember that every person has a story that you haven't heard, a wound that you haven't seen, and a logic that makes perfect sense inside their map of the world. So understanding is really how we honor that complexity without, obviously, losing ourselves. So in the EPA profile, when a client's understanding score is low, this is how we begin working together. We replace criticism with curiosity. So instead of engaging in a narrative of, how can they think that? I invite clients to try and ask a different questions. Like, what makes them believe that? How have they come to this conclusion? Or we work with clients for them so they learn to ask open questions or phrases that invite openness and dialogue. For example, let me better understand what you are saying, or what led you to this particular choice. We also work on slowing the judgment reflex. So first, we work on noticing how fast our mind reacts to judging or criticizing or condemning or shutting out. And then we insert a 10-second pause of complete silence where we don't say anything, we don't react, and we slowly and gradually and gently shift into curiosity. so that we can begin asking questions. I also invite clients to proactively engage in conversations with someone on an opposite worldview. So we take a particular topic that's dear to us and we sit across the table with someone who thinks the opposite. And we don't do this experiment to change their mind or to change our mind, but we do this experiment to learn to stay in curiosity, to learn to slow down our judgment reflex, and to learn how to ask questions. So one thing that I invite you to do is to observe yourself. Well, you can test all of these solutions or exercises. And this week, for the 7 days, journal every time that someone triggers you and what kind of situations trigger you, what kind of people trigger you, what kind of behavior or choices or ideas trigger you, and try and go a little bit deeper. What is it that you're not seeing, or what does this mirror back to you? Understanding is a practice of intense humility, and humility is holy ground for our evolution and our inner journey. So if this episode stirred something, maybe a conflict or a memory or a desire to soften where you have hardened a little bit, let me know what resonated most with you and what you would like to explore further, and we can do that together. So drop me a like and a follow because it really helps me. And remember, the parts of life that trigger us often hold the keys to our greatest expansion. So understanding as a trait doesn't change the world, but it changes how we walk through it. So until next time, ti abbraccio fortissimo.